Sarah's voice cut through the quiet of my living room. The doctor says I need another round of treatment by Friday, or the cancer will spread. She held out her hand, expecting the envelope of cash I usually prepared. My grandson, Timmy, coughed weakly from the sofa, his skin pale. I had just paid his medical bill last week, but Sarah insisted her needs were more urgent. I forced a smile and handed her the money, my fingers trembling. Inside, a cold knot tightened. This was the fifth time this year she'd demanded thousands, always with a new deadline. As she left, I watched Timmy shuffle to his room, his small shoulders slumped. I walked to the kitchen and picked up the phone. I dialed the number for the hospital billing department, my heart pounding. I would request copies of all recent statements under my name. The woman on the line said it would take 3 business days. I hung up, my mind racing. 3 days felt like forever when every dollar counted. Later, sorting through old mail, I found a crumpled receipt from a luxury spa dated last month. Sarah's name was on it. The spa was in the same city as her supposed specialist. My breath caught. I smoothed the paper and tucked it into my recipe box. No one would think to look there. That night, I lay awake, remembering how Sarah had cried when she first told us about her diagnosis. Now I wondered how many of those tears were real. The clock ticked past midnight. I had to know the truth before Friday, before Timmy suffered any more. I made a list of every withdrawal I'd made for her treatment over the past 2 years. The total made me dizzy. I thought about calling my son, but he always took her side. I was alone in this. The first step was to see those hospital records. If they didn't match her stories, I would stop the money flow immediately. My hands shook as I wrote down the phone number for a private investigator I saw advertised in the Senior Centre newsletter. I never imagined I'd need one. But for Timmy, I would do anything. The investigator's fee was high, but what was money compared to my grandson's health? I decided to sell the antique necklace my mother left me. It had been in the family for generations, but Timmy needed medicine, not sentimental jewelry. I called the pawn shop the next morning and made an appointment. As I hung up, Sarah's car pulled into the driveway. She was early. She marched in, her face set. "The doctor moved up the appointment," she said. "I need the money today." I looked at Timmy, who was trying to read a book, his glasses askew. I nodded slowly. "I'll get it," I said, but my mind was already working on a new plan. I went to the bank and withdrew the cash from my savings. The teller gave me a sympathetic smile. "Family emergency?" she asked. I just nodded. On the way home, I stopped at the post office and mailed the spa receipt to myself at a P.O. box I'd rented years ago for important documents. No one knew about it. When I handed Sarah the money, she snatched it without a thank you. "See you next week," she said, and drove off. I stood on the porch, watching her car disappear. Then I went inside and called the investigator. His voice was calm and professional. I gave him Sarah's full name and the dates of her supposed treatments. He said he'd start right away. I hung up, feeling a flicker of hope. But that evening my son Mark called. "Mum, Sarah said you've been acting strange. Are you feeling okay?" he asked, his tone concerned. I assured him I was fine, but my hands were cold. Sarah was already suspicious. I had to be careful. I went to bed early, but sleep wouldn't come. I thought about Timmy and how much he resembled his father at that age. I couldn't let him down. The next morning, I checked the P.O. box. The receipt was there. Safe. I also found a letter from the hospital confirming my records request was processing. I tucked everything into my purse and headed to the senior center for my usual volunteer shift. On the bus, I overheard two women talking about a friend who'd been scammed by a relative. I nodded along, but inside, I was calculating. How much had I given Sarah? Enough for a new car, probably. When I got home, there was a message on my machine from the investigator. "I have some preliminary information," he said. "Can we meet tomorrow?" My heart jumped. I called back and set a time at a quiet cafe downtown. I spent the rest of the day cleaning, trying to keep busy. That night, I dreamt of Timmy laughing, his cheeks rosy. I woke up with tears on my face. I dressed carefully for the meeting, choosing a warm sweater. The cafe was cozy, with the smell of coffee filling the air. The investigator was a kind-looking man in his 50s. He slid a folder across the table. "I checked the hospitals she mentioned," he said quietly. "There are no records of her being a patient there in the last 3 years." I stared at the papers, my vision blurring. All this time she'd been lying, and Timmy had gone without. I thanked him and paid his fee. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Mum, I need to talk to you about next month's treatment," she said, her voice sweet. I took a deep breath. "Come over tonight," I said. "We'll discuss it." I hung up and looked at the folder in my hand. Now, I had proof. But what would I do with it? I placed the investigator's folder in my safe, behind the family photo albums. Sarah would be here in an hour, and I needed to act normal. I made tea and set out cookies, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. When she arrived, she hugged me tightly, something she hadn't done in years. "The doctor says this new treatment is my last hope," she whispered, her eyes glistening. I nodded, pouring the tea. "How much?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. 10,000, she said, watching my face. "It's experimental, but they say it could save me." I sipped my tea, the warmth spreading through me. "I'll need to see the paperwork from the clinic," I said calmly. Her smile faltered. "Why? Don't you trust me?" I looked at Timmy's empty chair where he usually sat after school. "It's not about trust, Sarah. It's about making sure we're doing the right thing." She stood up abruptly. "I can't believe this, after all I've been through." She stormed out, leaving her tea untouched. I sat there, the silence heavy. My phone rang. It was Mark. "Mum, what did you say to Sarah? She's hysterical." I explained I just asked for documentation. He sighed. "She's fragile right now. Please, just help her." I hung up, feeling weary. I went to the bank the next day and transferred most of my savings into a new account under only my name. The manager, Mrs. Gable, knew me from years of banking there. "Everything all right, Eleanor?" she asked. I smiled. "Just being cautious," I said. She nodded understandingly. On the way home, I bought a small recorder from an electronics store. I tested it in the car, my voice echoing back. I would record my conversations with Sarah from now on. That evening, I visited Timmy at Mark's house. He was in bed, his breathing laboured. "Grandma, will I get better?" he asked. I held his hand. "Yes, sweetheart. We'll make sure of it." Sarah was in the kitchen on the phone. I heard her laughing. "Easy as pie. She'll never know." I clenched my fists, but kept walking. The next morning, I called a lawyer recommended by a friend at the senior centre. His name was Mr. Davies, and he specialised in elder law. I explained the situation briefly. He agreed to see me the following week. I spent the days gathering every bank statement, every receipt related to Sarah's treatments. I organised them in a binder, my handwriting neat and precise. On Friday, Sarah showed up unannounced. I have the paperwork, she said, handing me a stack of papers. I glanced through them. They looked official, but the clinic name was misspelled. I pretended to study them. This helps, I said. I'll get the money next week. She beamed and left. As soon as she was gone, I looked up the clinic online. It didn't exist. I recorded the date and time of her visit in my notebook. That weekend, I took Timmy to the park. He played on the swings, his laughter like music. I watched him, my heart aching. I couldn't let Sarah's greed harm him further. On Monday, I met with Mr. Davies. His office was warm, with leather chairs and books lining the walls. I showed him the binder and the investigator's report. He listened intently. "This is fraud," he said finally. "We can file a police report, but it might tear your family apart." I thought of Mark and Timmy. "What are my options?" I asked. He suggested revoking any power of attorney I'd given Sarah and setting up a trust for Timmy's medical expenses. I agreed. As I left, I felt lighter, but when I got home, there was a note taped to my door. "We need to talk. Urgent. Sarah." My stomach dropped. I went inside and checked the safe. The folder was still there. I called Mark, but he didn't answer. I sat in my rocking chair, the recorder in my pocket. Whatever happened next, I was ready. The doorbell rang just as I was settling in with my evening tea. It was Sarah, her face streaked with tears. "Mark left me," she sobbed, collapsing into a chair. I handed her a tissue, my recorder silently running in my pocket. "He found out about the money," she cried. "I told him it was for my treatment, but he didn't believe me." I stayed quiet, letting her talk. She admitted she'd been using the funds for personal expenses, but insisted she had cancer. "The stress made me lie about some things," she whispered. I nodded, my expression neutral. Inside, I was cataloguing every word. After she left, I played back the recording. Her voice wavered in all the right places, but there was no mention of actual medical proof. The next day, I visited Mr. Davies again. I gave him the recording. He advised me to secure all my assets immediately. I called the bank and placed a freeze on any joint accounts I had with Mark, just in case. Mrs. Gable was helpful, her voice calm over the phone. I felt a surge of gratitude for small kindnesses. That afternoon, I went to see Timmy at the hospital. He was admitted for breathing difficulties. The doctor pulled me aside. "His condition is worsening because he's not on the proper medication," he said gently. "The costs are high, but without it—" I didn't let him finish. "I'll cover it," I said, my voice firm. I used the money from the pawned necklace to pay the first installment. Seeing Timmy's small form in the hospital bed steeled my resolve. On the way out, I ran into Sarah in the hallway. She was talking to a nurse, her back to me. I overheard her say, "Just keep him comfortable. We can't afford anything else." My blood ran cold. I stepped forward. "Timmy will get whatever he needs," I said loudly. Sarah spun around, her eyes wide. "Eleanor, I didn't see you." I didn't reply, just walked past her. Later, at home, I reviewed my will with Mr. Davies over the phone. I changed it to leave everything to Timmy in a protected trust, with a neutral executor. Sarah would get nothing. I felt a pang of guilt, but then I thought of her at the hospital, and it vanished. The following week, I received a letter from the police department. They'd opened an investigation based on my report. I was to come in for a statement. I dressed in my best suit, the one I wore to my husband's funeral. The station was busy, but the officer was kind. I gave him copies of all my evidence. He told me it might take time. As I left, I saw Sarah's car parked across the street. She was watching me. I didn't look her way, just got into my car and drove off. That night, Mark called. "Mum, the police contacted me. What's going on?" I explained everything, my voice tired. He was silent for a long time. "I had no idea," he finally said. "I'm so sorry." We talked for an hour, and for the first time I felt he was on my side. But the next morning, Sarah showed up at my door with a lawyer of her own. "You're trying to ruin me," she hissed. "I'll sue you for defamation." I stood my ground. "Do what you have to," I said, and closed the door. My hands shook as I locked it. I called Mr. Davies, and he assured me she had no case. But the threat hung in the air. I decided to move some valuables to a safety deposit box. At the bank, Mrs. Gable helped me fill out the forms. "You're doing the right thing," she murmured. I hoped she was right. When I returned, there was a notice from the building management about a complaint filed against me for harassment. Sarah's doing, no doubt. I sighed and filed it away with the other papers. I was tired, but I couldn't stop now. I made an appointment with a social worker to discuss Timmy's care. I wanted to ensure he'd be protected no matter what. The social worker was a young woman named Lisa, with a gentle smile. She listened to my story and promised to help. As I walked out of her office, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Sarah moved out. Can Timmy and I stay with you for a while?" I read it twice, my heart swelling. I texted back, "Of course." But as I drove home, I wondered what Sarah would do next. She wasn't one to give up easily. I pulled into my driveway and saw a for sale sign on my neighbor's house. An idea began to form. What if I moved? Started fresh somewhere Sarah couldn't find me. But that felt like running away. I unlocked my door and went inside. The house felt emptier than usual. I checked my messages, one from the investigator. "I have more information on Sarah's spending habits. Call me." I dialed his number, my pulse quickening. He answered on the first ring. "She's been booking luxury vacations under your name," he said. "There's a trip to Hawaii scheduled for next month." I thanked him and hung up. I sat at the kitchen table, the familiar wood smooth under my hands. I had all the pieces now. It was time to end this. I spread the evidence on my kitchen table, the fake clinic papers, the spa receipts, the recorded conversations, and the investigator's report on the Hawaii trip. I called Mr. Davies and scheduled a meeting for the next day to finalize the trust for Timmy. Then I dialed the police officer handling my case. He agreed to meet me after hours to review the new information. I felt a strange calm, like the eye of a storm. That evening, Mark and Timmy arrived with suitcases. Timmy hugged me tightly, his small arms around my neck. "Grandma, Dad said we're staying here now," he said, his voice muffled. I kissed his forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, you're safe here." Mark looked exhausted. "Sarah cleaned out our joint account," he admitted. "I should have listened to you sooner. I made us dinner, and we ate in silence, the only sound the clinking of forks. After Timmy was in bed, Mark and I talked. I showed him the evidence. His face hardened. "I'll support whatever you decide," he said. The next morning, I went to the police station. The officer reviewed the Hawaii booking and shook his head. "This is clear fraud," he said. "We'll issue a warrant for her arrest." I signed the necessary papers, my hand steady. As I left, I saw Sarah's lawyer entering the building. Our eyes met briefly, but I didn't stop. I drove to Mr. Davies's office. He had the trust documents ready. I signed them, naming Mark as the trustee for Timmy. "This will protect his future," Mr. Davies said. I nodded, feeling a weight lift. On the way home, I stopped at the pharmacy to pick up Timmy's new medication. It was expensive, but I used the remaining money from the necklace. The pharmacist, a young man with kind eyes, wished me a good day. I smiled back, genuinely. When I got home, Mark was on the phone with his boss, arranging time off to care for Timmy. I overheard him saying, "Family comes first." My heart warmed. Later, I checked my email and found a message from the senior centre about a support group for grandparents raising grandchildren. I signed up for the next meeting. Maybe I could help others too. That night, as I tucked Timmy into bed, he asked, "Will Mom be okay?" I smoothed his hair. "We'll make sure she gets the help she needs," I said, which wasn't a lie. The next day, the police called. Sarah had been arrested at the airport, trying to board a flight to Hawaii. Mark went to the station to deal with it, while I stayed with Timmy. We baked cookies, and for a few hours, everything felt normal. But when Mark returned, his face was grim. "She confessed to everything," he said. "The fake cancer, the stolen money. She's facing charges." I hugged him, feeling his shoulders shake. "It's over," I whispered. But was it? The following week, I received a letter from Sarah's lawyer, demanding I drop the charges or she'd sue for grandparent rights to Timmy. I showed it to Mr. Davies. He laughed. "She has no grounds," he said. "We'll countersue for emotional distress and fraud." I agreed. I wasn't going to back down now. I started attending the support group at the senior centre. The other grandparents had similar stories, and sharing mine felt cathartic. One woman, Martha, became a friend. She advised me to focus on the good moments. I took her advice and planned a small picnic for Timmy and Mark in the backyard. We laughed and ate sandwiches, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. But a week later, I got a call from the hospital. Timmy's doctor wanted to discuss a new treatment option, one that was expensive, but had a high success rate. I didn't hesitate. "Schedule it," I said. I used the money from the sale of some stocks I'd forgotten I had. It was enough to cover the first few sessions. Mark found a job closer to home, and we settled into a routine. I thought the worst was behind us, until one afternoon I found a note in my mailbox. "You think you've won, but I'm not done yet. S." The handwriting was Sarah's. My breath caught. I showed it to Mark, and he immediately called the police. They increased patrols near our house. I didn't feel scared, just weary. I had faced worse. I decided to install a security system, something I'd never considered before. The technician was efficient, and within hours, cameras were in place. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the hum of the system. I thought about how much had changed. I wasn't just a grandmother anymore. I was a protector. The next morning, I received a package in the mail. It was from Sarah, sent before her arrest. Inside was a photo of Timmy as a baby, with a note. "You took everything from me." I threw it away, but the image stayed with me. I knew then that the battle wasn't over, but I was ready. I had my family, my evidence, and my resolve, and that was enough. The security system beeped softly as I disarmed it the next morning. Timmy was eating cereal at the table, his colour better than I'd seen in months. Mark was on the phone with the insurance company, trying to get coverage for the new treatment. I poured coffee, my hands steady. The note from Sarah was in the trash, but its threat lingered. I decided to take proactive steps. I called Mr. Davies and asked about a restraining order. He said, with the evidence we had, it would be granted easily. I filled out the paperwork online, my fingers tapping the keys with purpose. Later, I met Martha from the support group for lunch. We sat in a quiet diner, the vinyl booths familiar. "You've been through so much," she said, stirring her soup. I nodded. "But I'm not alone anymore." She smiled, and we talked about our grandchildren. It felt good to have a friend who understood. After lunch, I went to the bank to update my accounts. Mrs. Gable helped me set up automatic payments for Timmy's medical bills. "You're a strong woman, Eleanor," she said. I thanked her, but inside I knew strength came from necessity. When I got home, there was a voicemail from the police. Sarah had been released on bail with conditions to stay away from us. I played it for Mark, and he sighed in relief. "Maybe now we can move on," he said. But I wasn't so sure. That evening, I sorted through old photos, putting together an album for Timmy. I wanted him to remember the good times, not the chaos. Mark helped, his presence a comfort. As we worked, the doorbell rang. It was a delivery man with a package for me. I signed for it, my name flowing easily. Inside was a book from Martha, a thriller about a grandmother outsmarting a con artist. I laughed, the sound foreign but welcome. I started reading it that night, and for a few hours, I escaped into someone else's story. The next day, I took Timmy to his first treatment session. The hospital was bright and clean, the nurses kind. Timmy held my hand tightly. "Will it hurt, Grandma?" he asked. I squeezed back. "A little, but it will help you get better." He nodded bravely. Afterward, we stopped for ice cream, his favorite. Watching him lick the cone, I felt a surge of hope. But when we returned home, there was a car parked down the street, one I recognized as Sarah's friend's. I didn't panic. I called the police and reported a possible violation of the restraining order. They sent a car to check, but it was gone by the time they arrived. I wasn't surprised. I knew Sarah was testing the boundaries. I decided to change the locks, just in case. Mark helped me install them, his hands sure and strong. "We'll get through this, Mom," he said. I believed him. That weekend, we had a small birthday party for Timmy in the backyard. He turned 7, and his laughter filled the air. I watched him blow out the candles, his wish surely for health. I made a wish of my own, for peace. Later, as the sun set, I sat on the porch with Mark. "I'm selling the house," I announced. He looked surprised. "Why?" I explained that I wanted a fresh start, somewhere without memories of Sarah's deceit. He understood. We started looking at listings online, places near good schools and hospitals. It felt like a new beginning. But a few days later, I received a call from the court. Sarah's lawyer was pushing for a plea deal, reducing the charges in exchange for repayment of the stolen money. Mr. Davies advised against it. "She needs to face the consequences," he said. I agreed. I wouldn't let her buy her way out. The day of the hearing, I dressed carefully. The courtroom was formal, the air thick with tension. Sarah sat at the defendant's table, her head down. When the judge read the charges, I held my breath. She pleaded guilty to fraud and theft. The sentence was community service and restitution, but no jail time. I felt a mix of disappointment and relief. As we left, Sarah glanced at me, her eyes filled with hatred. I didn't flinch. Outside, Mark hugged me. "It's over," he said. This time I believed him. We drove home, the sky clear and blue. Timmy was waiting, his homework spread on the table. "Did we win, Grandma?" he asked. I kissed his cheek. "We did, sweetheart." But that night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the future. The house sale was pending, and we'd found a cozy cottage near the lake. I felt content, but cautious. I knew life could change in an instant. The next morning, I received a letter from the bank. The restitution from Sarah had been deposited into Timmy's trust. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was a start. I put the letter in the safe, next to the old evidence. Then I went to the kitchen and started breakfast, the smell of bacon filling the air. Timmy came in, rubbing his eyes. "Good morning, Grandma," he said. I smiled. "Good morning, my love." For now, that was all that mattered. The real estate agent called as I wrapped the last china plate. "The buyer's financing fell through," she said, sounding worried. My heart sank. This was the third time, and each time Sarah's name appeared in the paperwork. She was interfering from afar. I had to sell this house by month's end, or we'd lose our deposit on the cottage we hoped to move into. I took a deep breath and phoned my lawyer, Mr. Davies. "We must stop Sarah from causing more trouble," I told him. He suggested a court order to prevent her from contacting anyone involved. I agreed immediately. After hanging up, I watched my grandson Timmy colouring at the kitchen table. His new medicine was helping, but it was expensive. The house sale money was crucial. I decided to visit the buyer's agent myself to reassure him. His office was in a downtown glass building. I explained that Sarah had no legal claim. The young agent, Ben, promised to speak with the buyer again. Leaving his office, I spotted a familiar car across the street, Sarah's friend's. My heart raced, but I kept walking. Back home, I checked our security cameras and found nothing unusual. That evening, my son Mark discovered a flyer under his car's wiper. It advertised a support group for wrongfully accused parents, featuring Sarah's photo. I crumpled it, hands shaking, and called the police to report the harassment. They said they'd note it. The next day, I met Carol, a new real estate agent recommended by my friend Martha. Carol was direct. "I can sell this house," she said, reviewing the papers, "but we'll need to lower the price." I agreed, though it meant less money. Timmy's health came first. While signing the new agreement, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You can't hide forever." I showed Carol, and she advised changing my number right away, which I did in her office. That afternoon, I took Timmy to the park. His laughter on the swings eased my worries. I remembered Sarah pushing him there years ago. Now she was tearing us apart. A woman approached, showing a family services badge. "We've had a neglect complaint about your grandson," she said. I knew Sarah was behind it. I invited her to see our home and meet Timmy. After inspecting, she apologized. The complaint was unfounded, but we had to check. I thanked her, but inside I seethed. Later I reviewed Sarah's restitution payments. They were slow and insufficient. I decided to withdraw from my retirement fund for moving costs. At the bank, Mrs. Gable helped with the forms. "Are you sure?" she asked. I nodded. For Timmy, yes. As I left, I saw Sarah's lawyer entering the bank. He didn't notice me. I hurried home, anxious. There was a message from Mr. Davies. "Sarah is seeking visitation rights with Timmy. We have a hearing next week." I sank into a chair, overwhelmed. Mark came in, saw my face, and asked what was wrong. I told him, and he hugged me. "We'll get through this together," he said, but I knew another battle loomed. The next morning, I asked Carol to list the house as a motivated seller. She agreed. Then I met Mr. Davies to prepare for the hearing. He felt confident we could block visitation due to Sarah's past actions. Leaving his office, my phone rang. It was the hospital. Timmy's doctor wanted to discuss a new development in his treatment. My heart leaped. What now? I drove to the hospital to see my grandson, Timmy. The doctor met me in the hall and said Timmy's treatment was going well, but we needed 6 more months to be sure. I felt relief, then worry about the cost. My retirement savings were low, and bills piled up. At home, I cut cable and stopped eating out. My son Mark offered a second job, but I told him to focus on Timmy. He agreed, though I saw his concern. Later, my real estate agent Carol called. She had a cash buyer who wanted to close in 2 weeks, but a home inspection was needed. I agreed, and the inspector came the next day. He found faulty wiring in the kitchen. The repair cost wasn't huge, but it meant using more of my moving fund. I scheduled an electrician. While cleaning the garage, I found an old box of my daughter-in-law Sarah's things. Inside was her diary. I read it and discovered she had faked an illness to trick us. My hands shook. It felt wrong to snoop, but I thought of Timmy. I locked the diary in my safe for my lawyer, Mr. Davies. The electrician fixed the wiring, and the buyer approved. We were set to move in 10 days. Timmy helped me pack, carefully handling my china. He asked if the new house had a garden, and I promised he could plant flowers. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. That evening, Mark brought a letter from Sarah's lawyer. She was appealing the court order to repay us, claiming she had no money. I was furious. After all she took, she fought it. I called Mr. Davies, who said it was just a delay, and courts rarely change such orders. We attended the visitation hearing. The judge, a stern woman, listened carefully. Sarah acted remorseful, but Mr. Davies showed evidence of her lies and harassment. The judge denied her visitation due to unstable behavior. As she left, Sarah shot me a hateful look. I felt only relief. Back home, the bank called. Sarah's appeal had frozen the restitution payments. Frustrated, I decided to sell some antique furniture I'd inherited from my mother. It broke my heart, but family comes first. While waiting for the auction, Carol called. The buyer was hesitant because someone said the house was haunted by bad memories. I suspected Sarah. I drove to reassure them about our happy years there. They seemed doubtful, but listened. When I returned, a package was on my porch. Inside was Timmy's broken toy with a note. Some things can't be fixed. It chilled me. I threw it out and added motion sensors to my security system. That night, I lay in bed, hoping for a fresh start. When I heard a faint noise outside, my heart pounded. Was it the wind, or was someone there? The noise was just a stray cat, but it left me feeling jumpy. I couldn't let Sarah's threats disrupt our family any longer. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Mr. Davies, about a permanent restraining order. He agreed it was needed and began the paperwork. Then I met with Carol, the real estate agent, to finalize the house sale. The closing was set for Friday. I signed the papers and handed over the keys early. Walking out, I felt both sadness and hope. This house held so many memories of raising my kids and grandkids, but it was time to move forward. Back home, I kept packing boxes. With my grandson Timmy at school and my son Mark at work, the quiet felt heavy. I sorted through the photo albums, choosing which to bring to the cottage. I found a picture of Sarah holding Timmy as a baby, both smiling. For a moment, I felt a pang of sorrow over how things had fallen apart. But then I remembered the diary and her lies, so I closed the album. That afternoon, the auction house called. My old furniture sold for more than expected, enough to cover Timmy's medical treatments for several months. I felt so grateful and transferred the money straight into his medical account. Later, I visited the senior centre to say goodbye to my friend Martha and the others. They had a little party with cake and laughter. Martha hugged me and said I was an inspiration. I smiled, but inside, I felt weary from all the conflict. When I got home, there was a message from the police. Sarah had been arrested again for breaking the restraining order by sending another threatening letter. This time, she might face jail. I should have felt relieved, but I just felt tired. Mark came home early, looking grim. He told me he lost his job due to budget cuts. My heart sank. How would we manage? I hugged him and said we'd figure it out, though I wasn't sure how. That evening, we sat down as a family and discussed our options. We decided to use part of the money from the house sale to get by until Mark finds new work. It meant we'd have less for fixing up the cottage, but we could handle it. The next day, I took Timmy to his treatment at the clinic. He was brave, as always. The nurse said he looked much better, and that the medication was doing wonders. I nodded, but I worried about the cost if the restitution payments didn't come through. Afterward, we stopped at the library. Timmy picked out books about gardens. "For our new house," he said. His cheerfulness lifted my spirits. When we returned, there was a notice from the court. Sarah's appeal had been denied, and the restitution payments would start again. I felt a small victory and hoped for some peace. But while I was cooking dinner, the doorbell rang. It was a process server with papers from Sarah. She was suing me for emotional distress, claiming I turned her family against her. I laughed, but it felt hollow. I called Mr. Davies right away. He assured me it was a frivolous lawsuit that would be dismissed quickly, but it meant more legal fees. I used the last of the money from the antique sale to pay his retainer. That night, I lay in bed counting the days until the move. Just 3 more. I dreamed of the cottage and Timmy playing in the yard. But I woke up to a scraping sound. I rushed downstairs and found a nasty note slipped under the door that said, "You can't run." I called the police, my hands shaking. They came quickly, but there were no witnesses. I felt scared, but my resolve hardened. Sarah wouldn't win. I wouldn't let her. The police took that awful note as evidence, though I had little hope of catching Sarah. First thing, I hired a repairman to fix the broken window, dipping into my moving fund. It was costly, but necessary. Mark started job hunting right away. We sat at the kitchen table, and I helped him polish his application letters. We needed income fast. Later, I met my realtor Carol for the final walkthrough of my old house. The young buyers were thrilled and found no issues. Walking through the empty rooms, memories washed over me. Holidays, birthdays, quiet nights. I pushed them aside. This was for Timmy now. I signed the closing papers, and the sale money would arrive tomorrow. What a relief to be free of that place. Back home, I packed the last boxes. Timmy tried to help, asking, "Grandma, will I have my own room at the new house?" I assured him he would, with a garden view, and his smile warmed my heart. That evening, Mark got a call for a job interview at a local grocery store. It wasn't ideal, but he agreed to go. I felt proud of him. Next morning, the house money came. I transferred a chunk into Timmy's medical account and paid the movers, scheduling them for tomorrow. Then my lawyer called. Sarah's lawsuit was dismissed. But my joy faded when I checked the mail. A letter from social services, another complaint about Timmy's care during the move. I knew it was Sarah. I phoned the social worker, Lisa, who kindly agreed to visit us after we settled in. That afternoon, I took Timmy to say goodbye to his friends. He was quiet on the drive back. "I'll miss them," he murmured, "but I'm excited for the new house." I hugged him and promised we'd make new friends. When we returned, Mark was home. He'd gotten the job. We celebrated with pizza, almost feeling normal again. After tucking Timmy in, Mark and I talked at the kitchen table. "We must stay alert," he warned. "Sarah won't give up." I nodded. reminding him we had the restraining order and security. The movers came early next day. By noon, we were off to our new cottage. It was small but cozy, with a big yard. Timmy dashed in and claimed his room. I unpacked kitchen boxes, feeling hopeful, until my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. New house, same problems. I deleted it, uneasy, but checked the security. It was working. Later, I met a few neighbours on a walk. They seemed friendly. Back inside, Mark was assembling Timmy's bed. "Everything okay?" he asked. I forced a smile. "Yes, just adjusting." That night, in my new bed, I listened to unfamiliar sounds, worrying about Sarah. Then a car engine roused me. Peering out, I spotted a dark sedan parked down the street. My heart raced. Was it her? I grabbed my phone, but it drove off before I could call. I watched the empty street a long time, knowing sleep was lost. That dark car never returned, but it left me uneasy. The next morning, I asked Mark to help install security lights around our cottage. He's always so capable. And Timmy played in the garden, chattering as he dug for worms. Though it felt normal, I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. I called the police about the restraining order against Sarah, and the officer kindly promised more neighbourhood patrols, which helped settle my nerves a little. That afternoon, I took Timmy for his paediatric checkup. The doctor adjusted his medication and said he was doing well. What a relief that Mark's insurance covered it. On the way home, we stopped for seeds. Timmy chose sunflowers, saying, "They'll grow tall and bright, Grandma," which warmed my heart. Back home, Mark arrived in his work uniform, tired but content, and shared that his job was going smoothly. I thanked my lucky stars. We planted the sunflowers that evening in the rich soil, the cool air a comfort. For a while, I forgot Sarah's troubles, but then my lawyer, Mr. Davies, called. He said Sarah had been admitted to a psychiatric facility after a breakdown. I felt both pity and relief. Maybe she'd get help now. Mark was quiet before saying, "I hope she gets better for her own sake." I agreed, though the hurt remained. The next day, a letter arrived from Sarah. She apologized, admitted her lies, and asked forgiveness without requesting to see us. I read it twice and set it aside, not ready to forgive, but appreciating the gesture. Later, social worker Lisa visited, checked our home, and talked with Timmy. She confirmed we provided a stable environment and closed the complaint. A weight lifted from my shoulders. After she left, I watched Timmy play as the sunflowers sprouted. Mark brought me tea and said, "We made it, Mum." I nodded, knowing scars lingered. That weekend, we hosted a small housewarming with neighbour Martha and others. Laughter filled the cottage, and Timmy proudly showed his room. I felt a sense of belonging, though I caught myself checking the windows out of habit. The next week, I volunteered at the library, reading to children. Timmy joined sometimes, loving the stories. One afternoon, I saw a woman who resembled Sarah across the street. My heart jumped, but it was a stranger. I breathed deeply, reminding myself we were safe. That night, I dreamed of my late husband smiling, and I woke feeling peaceful. In the morning, our kitchen routine comforted me. Mark and Timmy joined for breakfast, and we discussed our day. Later, the bank called to say the restitution was complete, and Timmy's trust fund secured. I closed my eyes in gratitude. Hanging up, I noticed a missed call from an unknown number but didn't return it. Instead, I watered the growing sunflowers. They were getting tall, just as Timmy promised. Challenges might come, but for now, we were okay. Looking at our cottage, I felt a quiet resolve. We had weathered the storm together. The phone rang as I watered Timmy's sunflowers. It was the psychiatric facility. Sarah was discharged yesterday, the administrator said. My grip tightened on the watering can. She was out, and no one had warned us. I hung up and called Mr. Davies immediately. We need to reinforce the restraining order, I told him. He promised to file an update with the court by end of day. I walked inside, my hands shaking. Mark was at work, and Timmy was at school. I checked the security system. Everything was armed. Then I remembered the neighbour who moved in last week, a woman who always seemed to be watching our house. I decided to introduce myself properly later to see if she was connected. That afternoon, I visited the local police station to show them the discharge notice. The officer updated their records and promised extra patrols. Back home, I sorted through mail and found a letter from social services. Another anonymous complaint about Timmy's care, this time citing emotional neglect due to the move. I knew it was Sarah's doing. I called Lisa, the social worker, who agreed to visit next week to assess. It drained my peace of mind. I couldn't focus on anything else. While preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. It was the new neighbour, Mrs. Gable. Same name as my bank manager, but a different person. She brought a pie. Welcome to the neighbourhood, she said, smiling. I invited her in, but my guard was up. We chatted about gardens, and she mentioned she volunteered at a clinic. When she left, I noticed her glancing at Timmy's photo on the mantel. I stored that detail away. Later, Mark came home early, looking worried. My job might be cutting hours, he said. We sat at the kitchen table discussing budgets. If his income dropped, we'd need to dip into Timmy's trust fund, which I wanted to avoid. Pressure was building from every direction. The next morning, I received an email from Mr. Davies. The court had strengthened the restraining order, prohibiting Sarah from coming within 500 feet of us. But as I read it, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Orders can't protect you forever. I deleted it, but my heart raced. I decided to take Timmy to school myself instead of letting him take the bus. At drop-off, I saw a familiar car parked down the street, Sarah's friends. I drove straight to the police station and reported it. They said they'd investigate. When I returned home, Mrs. Gable was in her yard, waving cheerfully. Something felt off. That evening I reviewed our finances. Selling some old jewellery might help if Mark's hours were cut. I found a locket my husband gave me, but I couldn't part with it yet. As I put it away, I noticed a receipt in my purse from the grocery store. It had Mrs. Gable's name on the back, with S referral scribbled. S for Sarah? My breath caught. Was she involved? I called Mr. Davies and told him about Mrs. Gable. He advised caution and suggested I keep records. After hanging up, I checked the security footage from earlier. Mrs. Gable had been on her phone while staring at our house. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was a delivery man with a bouquet, no card. I accepted it, but when I opened it, a dead flower fell out with a note. Thinking of you. I dropped it, my hands trembling. Who sent this? I threw the bouquet in the trash, my heart pounding. Was it Sarah or Mrs. Gable? I called the police, and they took the note for evidence. Later, I confronted Mrs. Gable casually over the fence. Did you send flowers? I asked. She looked confused. No, why? I changed the subject, but I didn't trust her. Back inside, I checked Timmy's medical bills. One was higher than expected. I called the clinic, and they said there was a billing error. Someone had added unnecessary tests. I suspected Sarah had called pretending to be me. I corrected the bill, but it took hours on the phone. It cost me time and added to my stress. Mark came home, and I told him about the flowers and the bill. He hugged me. We'll get through this, he said, but his face was pale. His hours had been cut, so we adjusted our budget, postponing repairs on the cottage. The next day, I volunteered at the library, reading to children. It usually calmed me, but today I kept glancing at the door. During a break, I saw Mrs. Gable talking to another volunteer. I overheard her say, "Yes, she's the one with the grandson." My stomach tightened. Afterward, I approached her. "Do you know Sarah?" I asked directly. She froze, then admitted she used to work with her at a clinic years ago. "But I haven't seen her in ages," she claimed. I didn't believe her. I reported this to Mr. Davies. He suggested we might have a case for harassment if we could link them. I started a log of every interaction with Mrs. Gable. That evening, Timmy had a nightmare and came to my bed. "Grandma, I dreamed Mom was outside," he whispered. I held him tight, feeling a surge of anger. The following morning, I found a scratch on my car door. It was deep, like a key had been dragged across it. I called the police again, but there were no witnesses. Then, I received a call from the facility. Sarah had checked in for a follow-up appointment, so she wasn't nearby. But if not her, who? I decided to install a camera facing the street. Mark helped me set it up. As we finished, Mrs. Gable came over with cookies. "I heard about your car," she said. "That's awful." I thanked her but didn't invite her in. Later, reviewing the camera footage, I saw a figure in a hoodie near my car last night, but it was too blurry to identify. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went through old emails and found one from Sarah's friend from months ago, mentioning a mutual friend in my area. Was Mrs. Gable that friend? A sudden thought struck me. Perhaps Sarah had a network of people helping her. I closed the laptop, uneasy. Just then, my phone lit up with a notification. The camera detected motion outside. I peered out the window and saw a shadow moving near the garden. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but it vanished. Who was it? The shadow was gone by the time the police arrived, but they found footprints near the sunflowers. I showed them the camera footage, but it was inconclusive. The officer suggested motion-activated lights, which Mark installed the next day. It meant another dent in our savings, but safety came first. I called Mr. Davies about the possible network harassing us. He said without proof, it was hard to act, but to keep documenting. Later, I took Timmy to a playground. He played happily, and for a while, I forgot the stress. But then I saw Mrs. Gable watching from a bench. She waved, and I nodded back, but my guard was up. When we left, she followed us to the parking lot. "Your grandson seems sweet," she said. "It's a shame about his mother?" I didn't respond, just hurried Timmy into the car. At home, I checked the mail and found a letter from the school. Timmy's teacher wanted to meet about behavioral issues. My heart sank. Timmy had been quiet lately, but I thought it was adjustment. The meeting was set for Friday. I called Mark, and he agreed to come too. That evening, we talked to Timmy. He admitted kids were saying things about his mom being crazy. I hugged him, furious. Someone was spreading rumors. I suspected Sarah or Mrs. Gable. Now, the pressure was getting to Timmy. The next day, I visited the school early and spoke to the principal. I explained the situation with Sarah and the restraining order. She was understanding and promised to address the bullying. But she mentioned a parent had raised concerns about Timmy's home life, a woman named Gable. My suspicion confirmed. I confronted Mrs. Gable that afternoon. "Are you talking to the school about my grandson?" I asked. She denied it, but her eyes shifted. "I just care about children," she said. I told her to stay away from us, and she walked off, offended. Later, Mr. Davies called. He'd filed a complaint against Mrs. Gable for interference, but it would take time. I felt exhausted. Mark's job search wasn't going well, and we were using Timmy's trust for groceries. I sold my locket online, feeling a pang of loss, but it covered a month's expenses. Then, I received a package from Martha, a book on gardening. It was a kind gesture, and I called to thank her. She mentioned she saw Mrs. Gable at a community meeting, arguing with someone about family rights. I noted it down. That night, I reviewed the security footage and saw Mrs. Gable on her phone, often late at night. I wondered who she was calling. To my shock, when I enhanced the audio from a clip, I heard her say, "She's still suspicious." My blood ran cold. Was she reporting to Sarah? I decided to set up a recorder near the fence to catch conversations, but I felt guilty about invading privacy. As I debated it, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or else." I deleted it, but my hands were cold. Just then, Timmy came downstairs, crying. "I saw someone outside my window," he said. I held him tight and looked out. The motion light was on, but no one was there. What did they want? Timmy's fear kept him up all night, so I let him sleep in my bed. The next morning, I called the police about the message and the figure outside. They increased patrols, but found nothing. I installed the recorder near the fence, telling myself it was for protection. Mark found a part-time job at a warehouse, which helped financially, but he was often tired. We lost family time. We barely saw each other. Later, I met with Timmy's teacher. She said Timmy was withdrawn and had drawn pictures of scary shadows. My heart ached. I explained the situation, and she offered counseling services. I agreed, hoping it would help. On the way home, I stopped at the bank to update accounts. Mrs. Gable, the bank manager, was there and asked how we were settling in. I mentioned the harassment, and she suggested we close joint accounts to prevent fraud. I took her advice, feeling grateful for her help. Back home, I checked the recorder. I heard Mrs. Gable, the neighbour, on the phone. "She's getting closer. We need to step back." Then, "Sarah's not happy." My hands trembled. I had proof she was connected to Sarah. I called Mr. Davies and played it for him. He said it was enough for a cease and desist letter. He sent the letter to Mrs. Gable that day. She didn't respond, but I noticed she avoided me after that. The pressure eased slightly, but I knew it wasn't over. Then, I received a call from the psychiatric facility. Sarah had completed her program and was moving to a halfway house in another state. Relief washed over me, but then I wondered if it was true. That evening, Mark and I celebrated with a simple dinner. Timmy seemed happier, talking about school friends. For a moment, life felt normal, but after putting Timmy to bed, I checked the security footage and saw a car slow down near our house. It looked like Sarah's friend's car. I called the police, but it was gone when they arrived. The next day, I volunteered at the senior centre. Martha asked about Mrs. Gable, and I told her about the letter. She said Mrs. Gable had left town suddenly. "Good riddance," Martha said. I agreed, but I felt uneasy. Later, I sorted through old boxes and found Sarah's diary again. I reread it and noticed a name I'd missed. Dr. Evans, who had helped her fake medical records. I looked him up. He had a clinic nearby. Was he still involved? I called the investigator from before and asked him to check Dr. Evans. He promised to look into it. Just as I hung up, I received an email from an unknown sender with the subject, "Stop." It contained a photo of Timmy at the playground, taken recently. My blood ran cold. Who took this? The photo of Timmy shook me to my core. I called the police immediately and forwarded the email. They traced it to a public computer, but no leads. I kept Timmy home from school that day, telling him he had a cold. Mark took off work to stay with us. It meant his job was uncertain, but family came first. We reviewed all security measures, and I taught Timmy to never talk to strangers. Later, the investigator called back. Dr. Evans had retired, but his son ran the clinic now. He had no record of recent involvement with Sarah, but he mentioned Mrs. Gable had been a patient there. The connection was deepening. I thanked him and paid his fee from my emergency fund. That afternoon, I received a letter from the court. Sarah had filed for divorce from Mark, citing irreconcilable differences. It was a shock, but Mark seemed relieved. "Maybe this will finally cut ties," he said. We called Mr. Davies, who said it could simplify things legally. But the pressure returned when I checked the mail. Another anonymous complaint to social services, this time about unsafe living conditions due to the recent incidents. Lisa, the social worker, scheduled another visit. I spent the day cleaning and childproofing the house, though it was already safe. Then, Martha visited with a casserole. "I heard about the divorce," she said. "It's for the best." We talked, and she mentioned seeing Mrs. Gable at a bus station with a suitcase. "She looked like she was leaving for good," Martha said. I felt a glimmer of hope. After she left, I checked the recorder and heard nothing new. Perhaps Mrs. Gable was gone. But that evening, as I cooked dinner, the doorbell rang. It was a woman I didn't recognize. She introduced herself as Sarah's sister. "I'm here to make amends," she said. I was wary, but invited her in. She apologized for Sarah's actions and said Sarah was getting help. She offered to help with Timmy's expenses, but I declined. When she left, I noticed her car had out-of-state plates. I called Mr. Davies to verify her story. He said Sarah did have a sister, but they were estranged. Why show up now? When I looked up the sister online, I discovered she had a criminal record for fraud. My heart sank. Was this another trick? I decided to change our phone numbers and emails entirely. As I was setting up new accounts, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Got a full-time job offer." I smiled, but it faded when I saw the next message from an unknown number. "New number, same problems. Tell Mark congrats." How did they get his news? I called the police, my hands trembling. As I spoke, I glanced out the window and saw a figure across the street, watching the house. I hung up and dialed 911. Who was it? And what did they want now? The police arrived within minutes, but the figure had vanished. They found fresh tire marks down the street, suggesting a quick getaway. I gave them descriptions of everything, my voice shaky. After they left, I double-checked all the locks and woke Mark to tell him. He was alarmed, but tried to stay calm for Timmy's sake. We decided to keep Timmy home from school again, citing safety concerns. The school was understanding, but I worried about his education and social life. Later that morning, I called Mr. Davies about the latest incident. He advised filing for a broader restraining order to include any associates of Sarah. I agreed, though it meant more legal fees. I used some of my emergency savings to cover it, knowing it was necessary. That afternoon, I reviewed the security footage with Mark. We noticed a shadowy figure wearing a hoodie, but the face was obscured. It was frustrating. Then I remembered the sister who visited, Sarah's sister with the fraud record. I looked up her name online and found she had recently been released from prison. My stomach churned. Was she the one harassing us? I called the investigator again, but his rates had increased, and I couldn't afford it right now. Mark offered to take on extra shifts, but I refused. He needed to be with Timmy. The next day, I received a letter from social services. The complaint was dismissed after Lisa's visit, but the stress had taken a toll. Timmy was having nightmares again, and I spent most nights soothing him. I felt exhausted, my own health slipping as I skipped meals to save money. Then, an email arrived from an unknown address. Back off, or the boy gets hurt. I printed it and called the police immediately. They said they'd investigate, but without evidence, it was hard to act. I decided to take proactive steps. I contacted a security company and installed additional cameras around the property. It cost more than I wanted, but peace of mind was priceless. While they were installing, I saw Mrs. Gable's house was empty. A "for rent" sign in the yard. Had she really left? I wasn't sure. Later, Martha called to check on us. I told her about the threats, and she offered to stay with Timmy sometimes so I could rest. I gratefully accepted. That evening, Mark and I talked about moving again, but we couldn't afford it. We were stuck here, fighting this battle. I felt a deep sadness, thinking how Sarah's actions had torn our family apart. But then I looked at Timmy, sleeping peacefully, and knew I had to keep going. I started a new journal, documenting every threat and odd occurrence. It was my way of fighting back. The next morning, I checked the mail and found a postcard with a generic scenic image. On the back, it said, "Wish you were here?" in messy handwriting. It was postmarked from a city hours away. I showed it to the police, but they said it could be from anyone. As I was leaving the station, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the security app, motion detected in the backyard. I rushed home, my heart pounding. When I arrived, nothing was there, but the sunflowers were trampled. Someone had been in our yard. Who was it, and what would they do next? The trampled sunflowers felt like a personal violation. Timmy cried when he saw them. He had nurtured those plants. I hugged him tightly, promising to replant them. Mark helped me clean up, his face grim. We installed a fence around the garden later that day, another expense we hadn't planned for. I dipped into Timmy's trust fund for it, feeling guilty, but seeing no other way. That afternoon, I called Mr. Davies about the postcard and the yard intrusion. He suggested we might have enough for a harassment case against Sarah's sister, since she had a record. I agreed to pursue it. Later, I took Timmy to a counselling session at the school. The counsellor said he was showing signs of anxiety, but was coping well with support. I felt relieved, but also angry that he had to go through this. On the way home, I stopped at the library to research legal rights for grandparents. I found some helpful resources, but it was overwhelming. A librarian noticed my distress and offered assistance. Her kindness brought tears to my eyes. When we returned, there was a message from Mark. He'd been offered a better job with higher pay and benefits. It was a ray of hope. We celebrated with ice cream, and for a while, things felt normal. But that evening, I received another email. "You can't hide behind cameras forever." I didn't respond, just saved it and forwarded it to the police. They said they'd add it to the file. The next day, I visited Martha for coffee. She had heard from a mutual friend that Sarah's sister was seen in town recently. My hands trembled as I stirred my coffee. Martha offered to keep an eye out for anything suspicious. I thanked her, feeling less alone. Back home, I checked the security footage and saw a woman resembling Sarah's sister near our street yesterday. I called Mr. Davies with this information, and he said he'd file for a restraining order against her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went through old photos and found one of Sarah with her sister from years ago. They looked happy then. What had gone wrong? I felt a pang of pity, but it vanished when I thought of Timmy's fear. The next morning, I received a call from the police. They had questioned Sarah's sister, but she had an alibi for the time of the yard intrusion. I was frustrated. Was someone else involved? I decided to focus on strengthening our home security. I bought a dog from a shelter, a gentle Labrador named Buddy, to be a companion and deterrent. Timley loved him immediately, and Buddy's presence made us all feel safer. But as I was unpacking dog supplies, I found a note tucked in the bag. Dogs can't protect you. My blood ran cold. How did they get this into my purchase? I called the store, but they had no record of it. I realized then that the harassment was more pervasive than I thought. Who was doing this? And how were they always one step ahead? The note in the dog supplies left me shaken. I reported it to the police, but they had little to go on. I decided to change our routines, different grocery stores, varied routes for school and work. It was inconvenient, but necessary. Mark started his new job, and the higher income eased some financial pressure. We used part of it to pay back Timmy's trust fund for the fence, which made me feel better. That weekend, we replanted the sunflowers together as a family. Timley smiled for the first time in days, and Buddy wagged his tail, bringing a sense of normalcy. On Monday, I had a meeting with Mr. Davies about the restraining order against Sarah's sister. He said it was granted, but enforcing it would be tricky if she was using intermediaries. I left his office feeling somewhat relieved, but still on edge. Later, I volunteered at the senior centre, and Martha introduced me to a retired police officer who offered advice on home security. He suggested installing a panic button system, which I did the next day. It cost more, but Mark's new job covered it. Then, I received a letter from the bank. Mrs. Gable, the manager, had retired, and a new person was handling our accounts. I felt a loss. She had been a steady support. When I updated the new manager on our situation, he was sympathetic and helped me set up additional fraud alerts. Afterward, I checked the mail at home and found a brochure for a home security conference, addressed to me, but I hadn't signed up for it. Was this a taunt or a mistake? I threw it away, but it nagged at me. That evening, Timley had a friend over for a playdate. I watched them play in the yard, Buddy by their side, and felt a moment of peace. But when the friend's mother came to pick him up, she mentioned seeing a woman watching our house from a car down the street. I rushed out, but the car was gone. I called the police, but they found nothing. The next day, I decided to take a break and visit the library with Timley. While he picked out books, I researched harassment laws and found a support group for families dealing with similar issues. I signed up for their next meeting, hoping to find solace and strategies. Afterward, we stopped for pizza, and Timley chattered happily about school. It was a good day, but when we returned home, there was a package on the porch, a small box with no return address. I didn't open it. I called the police instead. They came and opened it carefully. Inside was a broken toy, similar to Timley's favourite one, with a note. Toys break easily. My hands trembled as I realised they were targeting Timley directly. The police took it as evidence, but I felt a new level of fear. That night, I slept with Buddy in my room and a phone by my bed. As I drifted off, I heard a car engine outside. I peered out the window and saw a dark sedan idling down the street. It didn't move for a long time. Who was inside, and why were they focused on us? The dark sedan drove off after 20 minutes, but I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I called the police with the description, and they promised to patrol the area more frequently. Mark adjusted his work schedule to be home earlier, which helped, but I could see the strain on his face. Timley was clingy, not wanting to go to school, so I arranged for him to do some lessons at home temporarily. It meant I had less time for myself, but his safety came first. Later, I attended the support group meeting I'd signed up for. Hearing others' stories made me feel less alone, and I shared my experiences. One man suggested I keep a detailed log of all incidents, which I was already doing, but he emphasized sharing it with legal authorities regularly. I took his advice and emailed Mr. Davies an updated log. He replied that he was building a case for criminal harassment charges against unknown persons, which could lead to a broader investigation. That afternoon, I received a call from the investigator. He had looked into Sarah's sister and found she had been in contact with Mrs. Gable before she left town. They had a history of collaborating on small scams. This confirmed my suspicions, but without current evidence, it was hard to act. I thanked him and paid his fee from my savings, knowing it was worth it. Then, I checked our finances and realized we were dipping into reserves too often. I decided to sell some more items online, old furniture and jewelry, to rebuild our emergency fund. It was painful to let go of memories, but necessary. As I was listing items, I found a locket that had been my mother's. I couldn't part with it, so I put it back, feeling emotional. The next day, I took Timley and Buddy for a walk in a new park to avoid our usual spots. He enjoyed the change, and Buddy loved the open space. But when we returned, there was a message on our home phone, a distorted voice saying, "We're watching." I saved it and called the police immediately. They traced it to a disposable phone, but no luck. I felt overwhelmed and called Martha for support. She came over with dinner and stayed to talk. Her presence was comforting, and she offered to help with Timley so I could have a break. I gratefully accepted and spent the next morning at a quiet cafe, reading a book. It was the first time I'd relaxed in weeks, but when I returned home, I found a flyer stuck in the door. It advertised a family reconciliation service with Sarah's photo on it. I crumpled it, furious. How dare they use her image like that? I called Mr. Davies, and he said he'd send a cease and desist to the organization, though he doubted it was legitimate. That evening, as I was putting Timley to bed, he asked, "Grandma, will we always be safe?" I hugged him and said, "I'll always protect you." But after he fell asleep, I checked the security cameras and saw a figure lurking near the fence. I activated the panic button, and the alarm blared, scaring them off. The police came quickly, but the figure was gone. As they left, one officer handed me a note they found on the ground. "This isn't over." My heart sank. What would it take to end this? The note left by the figure read, "This isn't over," in the same messy handwriting as before. I gave it to the police, but they had no new leads. The constant vigilance was exhausting me. I lost weight and had trouble focusing. Mark noticed and insisted I see a doctor. I went reluctantly and was prescribed medication for anxiety, which helped a little. But the cost added to our bills, and I worried about relying on it. Later that week, I met with Mr. Davies to review the case. He had filed for criminal harassment charges based on the accumulated evidence, but the process was slow. He advised me to consider a temporary move for safety. But I refused. We couldn't afford it, and I wouldn't be driven from our home. Instead, I invested in a security system that included window sensors and a direct line to the police. Mark's job covered the installation, but the monthly fee stretched our budget. Then, I received a letter from Sarah. She was in a halfway house in another state and claimed she had cut ties with her sister and associates. She apologized again and said she was focusing on her recovery. Part of me wanted to believe her, but I was too wary to trust it. I showed the letter to Mr. Davies, who suggested it might be genuine, but to remain cautious. The next day, Timley had a good day at school, and his teacher reported he was participating more. It was a small victory that lifted my spirits. We celebrated with a movie night at home, Buddy curled at our feet. For a few hours, we felt like a normal family again. But that night, I dreamed of Sarah standing outside our window, and I woke up sweating. The following morning, I checked the security footage and saw nothing unusual, but I noticed a car that seemed familiar parked down the street several times over the past week. I took a screenshot and showed it to the police. They ran the plates and found it was registered to a rental company, but the renter had used fake ID. Another dead end. I decided to focus on positive activities. I started a small garden with Timley, planting vegetables and flowers. It was therapeutic, and he loved watching them grow. Martha joined us sometimes, bringing seeds and advice. Her friendship was an anchor in the chaos. But then I received an email from the support group. Someone had joined recently asking many questions about my story. I felt exposed and withdrew from the group, fearing infiltration. It was another loss of support. One afternoon, while shopping, I saw a woman who looked like Sarah's sister in the store. I quickly left with Timley, my heart racing. When I got home, I called the police, but they couldn't find her. I realized then that the fear was controlling me, and I needed to take back control. I sat down with Mark and Timley, and we made a family safety plan, including code words and emergency contacts. It empowered us, and Timley felt involved. Afterward, I reviewed my journal and saw how many incidents we had overcome. We were stronger than I thought. But as I was putting the journal away, I noticed a recent entry I didn't remember writing. Watch your back. My blood ran cold. Someone had accessed my private journal. How was that possible? I locked it in a safe, but the violation shook me. Who was behind this? And how far would they go? The words, "Watch your back," stared up from my journal in handwriting I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I slammed the book shut. Someone had been in my home, touching my private thoughts. I immediately checked the security system logs, but there were no breaches shown. How did they get in? I called the police, and 2 officers arrived within the hour. I showed them the journal and explained the situation. They dusted for fingerprints, but found nothing useful. After they left, I felt a deep violation. My safe space was compromised. I decided to change all the locks on the doors and windows, costing me another $200 from my dwindling savings. That evening, I told Mark about the incident. His face paled, and he suggested we install security cameras inside the house. I agreed, though it meant more monthly fees. These investigations were getting expensive, and I had to dip into Timmy's trust fund again, feeling guilty each time. The next morning, I reviewed the outdoor camera footage from the past week. I noticed a utility worker near the house a few days ago, but he seemed legitimate. Then, I remembered I had hired a cleaner last month to help with deep cleaning after the move. Could she have accessed the journal? I called the cleaning service, but they said she no longer worked there and had moved away. Another dead end. I felt frustrated and isolated. Later, I took Timmy to the park with Buddy. He played on the swings, and for a while, I forgot the fear. But when we returned home, there was a package on the porch, a small box with no return address. I didn't open it. I called the police instead. They arrived and opened it carefully. Inside was a burned photograph of our family, with the faces scratched out. A note read, "Memories can be erased." My blood ran cold. This was escalating, and Timmy was directly targeted again. I called Mr. Davies and updated him. He advised me to keep all evidence and said he would push for a faster investigation. I spent the afternoon reinforcing the home security, adding sensors to the windows and doors. Mark helped after work, but I could see the tiredness in his eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to every sound. Around 2 a.m., I heard a faint scratching noise outside. I peeked through the blinds and saw a shadow moving near the garden. I activated the alarm, and the sirens blared, scaring the figure away. The police came, but they found no one. As they left, one officer handed me a small item he found near the fence, a keychain with the initials SG, Sarah Gable. But Mrs. Gable had left town. Was this a red herring or a clue? I stored it in my safe, my mind racing. Who was behind this, and why were they so persistent? The keychain with SG initials haunted me. Was it Sarah's or Mrs. Gable's? I called the investigator to look into it, but he was booked for the week. I decided to visit the local pawn shops to see if anyone had sold similar items, but no luck. These investigations were getting expensive, and I had to dip into Timmy's trust fund again, feeling guilty each time. Mark's new job was stable, but we were barely keeping up with expenses. The pressure was constant, and I felt my health declining. I had headaches and trouble sleeping even with the medication. A few days later, I received a call from Timmy's school. Another parent had complained about him, saying he was causing disturbances. I knew it was fabricated, but I had to meet with the principal. I explained the harassment we were facing, and she was understanding, but suggested counselling for Timmy. I agreed, though it meant more costs. After the meeting, I saw a woman watching me from the parking lot. She looked like Sarah's sister. I approached her, but she hurried away and drove off. I took down her license plate and reported it to the police. They said they would follow up, but I doubted anything would come of it. That evening, Martha visited with a homemade pie. We sat in the kitchen, and I told her about the keychain and the sister. Martha mentioned she had seen a woman matching the sister's description at the grocery store recently, talking to a man in a uniform. I wondered if they were working together. After Martha left, I checked the security footage from the past few days and noticed a man in a utility uniform near our house multiple times. I hadn't scheduled any repairs. This changed everything. I had assumed it was just women involved, but now a man was in the picture. I saved the footage and sent it to Mr. Davies. The next morning, I received an email from an unknown address with the subject, "Back off." It contained a blurred photo of Timmy at school. I immediately called the police, and they traced the email to a public library computer. No leads. I felt helpless. Later, while cleaning out the garage, I found an old box of Sarah's things I had missed. Inside was the address book with names and numbers, including Mrs. Gable's and a man named Joe with a local number. I called the number, but it was disconnected. Another clue, but where did it lead? As I was putting the box away, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Got a bonus at work?" I smiled, but then another text followed from an unknown number. "Congratulations to Mark. Too bad it won't last." How did they know? I felt a chill. Were they watching us that closely? The text about Mark's bonus terrified me. They knew intimate details of our lives. I called the police again, but they said without more evidence, there was little they could do. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I visited the public library where the email was sent and asked about security footage, but they said it was overwritten after a week. I left feeling defeated. Later, I met with Mr. Davies to discuss the new clues. He suggested we hire a private investigator to surveil Sarah's sister, but it was expensive. I used some of my retirement funds to pay for it, knowing it was necessary for our safety. The investigator, named Tom, started the next day. He called me with updates. Sarah's sister was living in a cheap apartment across town and had been seen meeting with a man in a utility uniform. Tom sent me photos, and I recognized the man from the security footage. His name was Joe, according to the address book. This was a breakthrough. I shared this with the police, and they agreed to look into it. The pressure eased slightly, but I still felt on edge. A few days later, Timmy had a counseling session. The counselor said he was improving, but still anxious about bad people. It broke my heart. On the way home, we stopped for ice cream, and Timmy asked if we could move away. I told him we were doing everything we could to stay safe. That evening, Mark and I talked about the possibility of moving if things didn't improve, but we both knew it wasn't feasible financially. The next morning, I received a letter from Sarah. She wrote that she had heard about the harassment and claimed she had no part in it. She said her sister was acting alone and that she was truly sorry. I didn't know whether to believe her, but I stored the letter with the other evidence. Then, Tom, the investigator, called. He had followed Joe and discovered he was a handyman who had done work for Mrs. Gable in the past. Joe had a record for petty theft. The police picked him up for questioning, but he denied everything. Without proof, they had to release him. I felt frustrated but determined. I decided to set up a hidden camera in the living room to catch anyone who might break in. That night, as I was adjusting the camera, I heard a noise in the backyard. I looked out and saw Joe lurking near the fence. I called the police immediately, but he was gone by the time they arrived. After they left, I checked the hidden camera footage and saw something shocking. A figure had been in the house earlier that day while I was out, placing the burned photo in the journal. It was too blurry to identify, but I had proof of intrusion. I saved the footage, but as I did, I received a text. "Nice camera. Too bad it won't help." They knew about the camera? How? I realized then that they might have access to our Wi-Fi. I changed the password immediately, but the violation felt endless. The realization that our Wi-Fi might be compromised sent me into a panic. I called a tech specialist to secure our network, costing another $100. He found no malware, but recommended changing all passwords and enabling two-factor authentication. I spent the day updating every account, feeling overwhelmed. The expenses were mounting, and I had to sell more jewelry online to cover them. Each sale felt like losing a piece of my past, but I had no choice. Later, Tom, the investigator, called with news. He had followed Joe to a meeting with Sarah's sister at a diner. He recorded their conversation, and they were discussing scaring the old lady and getting money. This was the evidence we needed. I immediately called Mr. Davies and the police. They obtained a warrant for their arrest based on the recording. Within hours, both were taken into custody. I felt a surge of relief. Maybe this was finally over. But the pressure didn't stop. That evening, I received a call from a blocked number. A distorted voice said, "You think you've won, but there are others." I hung up, my hands shaking. Were there more people involved? I tried to focus on the positive. Joe and the sister were in jail, and the harassment might end. Mark came home early, and we celebrated with a quiet dinner. Timmy seemed happier, and Buddy wagged his tail, sensing the calm. The next day, I attended a court hearing for Joe and the sister. They were charged with harassment and trespassing. The judge set bail high, and they remained in custody. Mr. Davies said it was a good outcome, but warned that Sarah might still be a threat indirectly. I nodded, knowing the battle wasn't completely over. On the way home, I stopped at the store and bought flowers to replant the garden. Timmy helped me, and we worked in the soil, feeling hopeful. But that night, as I was locking up, I noticed a car parked down the street with its lights off. I watched for a while, and it didn't move. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, it was gone. They found nothing suspicious. I went to bed uneasy, dreaming of shadows chasing me. The next morning, I checked the mail and found a letter from Sarah's lawyer. She was appealing the restitution order, claiming financial hardship. I sighed, tired of the legal battles. As I opened the letter, a small photo fell out. It was of Timmy playing in the yard, taken recently. On the back, it said, "He's always watching." My blood ran cold. Who took this, and why send it now? Was someone else still out there? The photo of Timmy with the note, "He's always watching," made my stomach churn. I called the police immediately and gave them the letter and photo. They said they would investigate, but I knew it would take time. I decided to keep Timmy home from school again, despite his protests. Mark adjusted his work schedule to help, but I could see the stress on his face. This endless vigilance was wearing us all down financially and emotionally. I spent the day reinforcing the security system, adding more cameras and motion lights. The expenses were draining my savings, but I had no choice. Later, I met with Mr. Davies about Sarah's appeal. He was confident we could block it, but it required more legal fees. I used the last of my emergency fund to pay him, hoping it would be the end. After the meeting, I visited Martha for coffee. She had heard about the arrests and was relieved, but I told her about the new photo. She suggested we start a neighborhood watch to keep an eye on suspicious activity. I agreed, and we planned to talk to other neighbors. It felt good to have community support. That evening, Mark and I sat down with Timmy for a family talk. We explained that we were doing everything to keep him safe, and that he could always talk to us about his fears. He hugged me and said, "I love you, Grandma." It warmed my heart, but I felt the weight of responsibility. After he went to bed, I reviewed the security footage and noticed a car I didn't recognize driving by slowly multiple times. I took down the license plate and reported it to the police. They said they would check it out. The next day, I received a call from the police. The car was registered to a rental company, and the renter was using a fake ID, another dead end. I felt frustrated, but determined not to give up. I decided to focus on positive activities and took Timmy to the library to borrow books on gardening. He chose a book on sunflowers, and we planned to plant more. While there, I saw a notice for a community safety workshop and signed up. It was free, and I hoped to learn new strategies. But when we returned home, there was a package on the porch, a small box wrapped in brown paper. I didn't touch it. I called the police. They came and opened it. Inside was a doll with its head torn off and a note. This could be him. I gasped, clutching Timmy close. The police took it as evidence and promised to increase patrols. After they left, I broke down crying. How could anyone be so cruel to a child? That night, I lay in bed, thinking about all we had been through. I realized that while we had stopped some harassers, others might still be out there. I needed to stay strong for my family. As I drifted off, I heard a noise outside. I peered out the window and saw a figure running away from the house. I called the police, but they found no one. Before they left, one officer handed me a note they found on the ground. "We're not done yet." My heart sank. Who was this? And what did they want from us? The note, "We're not done yet," lay on my kitchen table after the police left. My hands were steady now, a cold resolve settling in. I would not let these cowards terrorize my family any longer. First, I called Mr. Davies and reported the latest threat. He advised me to document everything and promised to push for a broader restraining order. Then, I reviewed the security footage from last night. The figure was too fast to identify, but I noticed a distinctive patch on their jacket sleeve, a logo I'd seen before. I spent the morning searching online and found it matched a local handyman service. Could this be another associate of Sarah? I called the service, pretending to need repairs, and described the jacket. The manager said only one employee had that jacket, a man named Leo, but he hadn't shown up for work today. I thanked him and hung up, my heart racing. This was a new lead. I contacted Tom, the investigator, and asked him to look into Leo. His rates had gone up, but I used money from selling an old vase to pay him. Mark was at work, and Timmy was home with me, doing schoolwork at the table. He seemed quieter lately, and I worried about the long-term effects of this stress. Later, I checked our finances. We were dipping into savings again for security and legal costs. I decided to cancel a planned dental procedure to save money. My health could wait. Timmy's safety couldn't. That afternoon, I received a call from the police. They had questioned Leo based on my tip, but he had an alibi for last night. I was frustrated, but then I remembered the Wi-Fi breach from before. I hired a tech expert to do a deep scan of our network. He found a hidden device attached to our router, a small gadget that allowed remote access. Someone had planted it during one of the earlier intrusions. I removed it and secured the system, but the violation made me shudder. How long had they been listening? As I was disposing of the device, Martha called. She had seen a suspicious van near our street and took down the license plate. I gave it to the police, and they found it was registered to a fake company. The harassment was more organized than I thought. That evening, Mark and I talked about moving again, but we both knew it wasn't feasible. We had to stand our ground. After putting Timmy to bed, I checked the security cameras and saw a light flickering in the distance. A signal? I called the police, but they found nothing. Before going to sleep, I tucked a baseball bat under my bed. I was done being a victim. The baseball bat under my bed gave me a grim comfort. The next morning, I woke early and called Tom for an update on Leo. He had followed Leo to a rundown apartment complex and seen him meeting with a woman who matched Sarah's sister's description. Tom took photos and sent them to me. I forwarded them to the police and Mr. Davies. This was proof they were still connected. The police agreed to bring Leo in for questioning again, but I knew they might not hold him without more evidence. The legal process was slow, and I was running out of patience and money. Later, I took Timmy to his counselling session. The counsellor said he was making progress, but needed stability. I felt a pang of guilt. I was trying my best. On the way home, we stopped at the store for groceries. As we were leaving, I saw Leo in the parking lot, watching us. I confronted him directly. "Why are you harassing my family?" I demanded. He laughed and said, "You have no proof of anything." I recorded the conversation on my phone, but he walked away before I could get more. When I got home, I played it for Mark. He was angry and wanted to confront Leo himself, but I stopped him. We couldn't risk escalation. That evening, I received a letter from the court. Sarah's appeal for reduced restitution was denied. A small victory, but it didn't stop the harassment. I used the opportunity to update our will again, ensuring Timmy's trust was ironclad. Mr. Davies helped me with the paperwork, but it cost another $500. I sold some silverware to cover it, feeling the loss of family heirlooms. The next day, Tom called with more news. He had dug into Leo's background and found he was Sarah's cousin, with a history of petty crimes. They were family, working together. I shared this with the police, and they issued a warrant for his arrest based on the new evidence. But that night, as I was locking up, I found a note taped to my door. "Family sticks together." It was in the same handwriting as before. I called the police, and they took it for evidence. After they left, I checked the security footage and saw Leo placing the note. but he was gone before they could catch him. The audacity chilled me. How many more were there? Leo's note, "Family sticks together," made me realize this was a coordinated effort from Sarah's relatives. I couldn't fight them all alone. The next morning, I called a meeting with Mr. Davies and the police detective assigned to our case. I showed them all the evidence, the recordings, the photos, the notes. They agreed to treat it as a sustained harassment campaign and assigned more resources. The detective promised to patrol our street nightly and put a trace on any future threats. I felt a glimmer of hope, but it meant I was constantly on edge, with no peace of mind. Later, I visited the senior center and shared my story with the support group. One man, a retired judge, offered to connect me with a victim advocacy program. I gratefully accepted, and they provided free legal advice and counseling services. This eased the financial burden slightly. When I returned home, Timmy was playing with Buddy in the yard, his laughter a balm to my soul. But then I noticed a car slow down near our house. It was Leo's. I called the police immediately, and they intercepted him a few blocks away. He was arrested for violating the restraining order. Finally, some action. That evening, Mark and I celebrated with a simple dinner. He told me his job was going well, and we might be able to save for a vacation someday. I smiled, but inside, I wondered if we'd ever feel truly safe. After dinner, I checked the mail and found a letter from Sarah. She wrote that she was cutting ties with her family and moving to another state for a fresh start. She apologized again and promised to never contact us. I didn't know if I could believe her, but I stored the letter with the others. The next day, I received a call from the prosecutor. Leo had confessed to the harassment under pressure, implicating Sarah's sister as the mastermind. They were both facing serious charges. The court date was set for next month. I felt a weight lift, but then I remembered the initial note about others. Was this really over? As I was pondering, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You got Leo, but I'm still here." My blood ran cold. Who was this? The text, "I'm still here," sent a shiver down my spine. I called the police right away, and they traced it to a disposable phone, but no leads. This had to end. I decided to take a drastic step. I reached out to Sarah directly through her lawyer. I asked for a mediated conversation to clear the air. Mr. Davies arranged it, and we met via video call the next day. Sarah looked tired and older. She admitted she had encouraged her family to harass us initially, but claimed she had stopped after entering the halfway house. She said her sister and cousin were acting on their own out of misplaced loyalty. I told her about the continued threats, and she seemed genuinely shocked. She promised to speak to them and make it stop. I didn't fully trust her, but it was a start. After the call, I felt drained. The emotional toll was heavy, and I spent the afternoon in the garden with Timmy, planting new flowers. He asked if the bad people were gone, and I said we were working on it. His trust in me was unwavering, and that gave me strength. Later, Mark came home with good news. He got a promotion, which meant a raise and better insurance. We could finally start rebuilding our savings. I used part of it to repay Timmy's trust fund for the money I'd borrowed. The next week, the court case against Leo and Sarah's sister proceeded. They pleaded guilty to multiple charges and were sentenced to community service and probation, with orders to stay away from us. The judge warned them that any violation would mean jail time. I attended the hearing with Mark, and for the first time, I felt a sense of justice. Afterward, Mr. Davies told me that with Sarah's cooperation, the harassment should cease. But as we left the courtroom, I saw a woman watching us from the back. She looked like Sarah's mother, whom I'd never met. She nodded at me sadly and walked away. Was this the end, or just another chapter? The woman in the courtroom was indeed Sarah's mother. She sent me a letter the next day, apologizing for her family's actions and explaining that she had tried to stop them but felt powerless. She included a small check as restitution, which I donated to a children's hospital in Timmy's name. I replied, thanking her and hoping for peace between our families. That gesture felt like closing a door on the past. The threats stopped after that. No more notes, calls, or mysterious figures. The police closed our case, and the security cameras gathered dust. We finally had quiet. Mark's promotion allowed us to breathe easier. We used the extra income to fix up the cottage, painting the walls and adding a swing set for Timmy. He started sleeping through the nights, and his laughter became a constant melody in our home. I resumed volunteering at the library, reading to children, and found joy in the simple routines. Martha and I started a community garden where neighbours gathered to share stories and support. It became a symbol of renewal for me. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes, I found the locket I thought I'd sold. It had been tucked away in a forgotten pocket. I held it, remembering my husband, and decided to keep it for Timmy someday. The pain of the past was fading, replaced by gratitude for the present. Mark began dating a kind woman from his work, and Timmy liked her. We were becoming a family again, not defined by fear, but by love. I still have moments of unease, like when the doorbell rings unexpectedly, but they pass. Buddy greets me with wagging tail, and the sunflowers bloom brightly in the yard. I sit on the porch in the evenings, watching Timmy play, and feel a deep contentment. We faced the storm and emerged stronger. The revenge I sought turned into resilience, and that was enough. Life moved on, and so did we.